Howdy, Bob Brown here. I've gotten a lot of questions about the Bob Corners, comments, questions. How do you build it? What do you use it for? Things like that. Well, first I got to give credit where credit's due because I didn't come up with the idea specifically. I came up with variations of it. But Brian Shea, back in the mid 80s, late 80s, something like that, lived up in Bristol, Connecticut. World-class arm wrestler, won the world. Most of you guys have no idea who he is because it was so long ago and he hasn't arm wrestled in a long time. But you can ask the best of the best around. Ask Ingen Terzi and any of the top guys that are of lighter weight that remember back then. They'll tell you. So I'm down in his garage, or in his basement actually, and he had a sit-down table, and then he had these bands coming from everywhere, and I'm like, what's this? And so I sit down and put my arm up, and he starts handing me bands, and I'm just, he's just handing them me in my hand, and I grab a bunch of them, and he says, arm wrestle, and I was like, holy moly, that thing was incredible. I mean, it nothing felt like grabbing onto an arm like anything. And what's interesting about these is, let me just get rid of this handle. The handle is the part that I created, but it's true that if you grab one from here, or better yet, if you grab one from the right and one from straight in front of you, and you just hold it right here, it's basically the same as grabbing one from here and holding it. But it's not exactly the same. If I grabbed one from here and put it around my wrist, and then I grab this one and put it around my wrist, that's nearly identical, as long as I don't move. They're the same angle. They create the same angle. But the second you put one in your hand, well, it changes a little bit. Because now I've got a pressure attacking from an arm standpoint, it's the same angle as that one. But from a hand standpoint, because that's a completely separate joint, now it's wanting to knock my wrist back this way when it's around your forearm. Of course it's not, it's all about your arm. And then you've got it wanting to knock your knuckles down. So not only if you're like this and you put it around your hand, it's wanting to knock your knuckles back, but it's not wanting to knock your knuckles down. I'm relaxed, and all it's doing is pulling it back. So when you have two and I relax, you can see it's knocking it back and down. So I'm having to fight to maintain this position, both with knuckles up and wrist flexion. And that's where the two separate angles can affect the arm differently than just simply one. And then, because here's the deal. In order to maintain this position when you're arm wrestling, you got to do a lot of stuff. You might have to be pulling down at the same time you're going sideways, at the same time you're coming backwards. And if you grab one from the side, one from here, and one from the top, now I've got to fight down at the same time I'm fighting these angles. So sure, I could have one band coming from this higher angle to equate these three, but I still don't get the same effect on the wrist, because you've got a shoulder joint, an elbow joint, a wrist joint, and your elbow joint only moves basically one direction. Your shoulder moves a multitude of directions, and your wrist moves a multitude of directions. And of course, let's say you got that short arm. Well, you're trying to hold someone down if you've got a short arm and they're fighting up against you, but don't a lot of top rollers fight coming this way? So I might want to have some side, some front. Well, let me put this one on. Well, I'll just grab them all. Now I've got pressure coming from below. And so again, it's wanting to attack my wrist down and back while now opening up my arm. If I just have these two and I completely relax, it's not attacking my arm at all. It's really just the hand and wrist. But as soon as I add this one in and I relax, it's opening up everything. So having a multitude of angles from the right, from the front, and from the top can create a lot of different circumstances on your arm and your wrist, tremendously better than just one. And the other reality is when it's time to pin this thing, the angle that these two create is going to change, go straight to the side, go more back pressure. The angle is going to change different than the pivot point of just one, here versus here. Plus, here's the other real reality. People were commenting about how I'm gonna smack myself in the face. Well, if I wanted to get a really hard workout at this angle, I'd have to have a pretty heavy band over there. And I'd have to have a screw that holds it into the wall, and I'd have to really pull hard on that band. And I might pull that screw out and smack myself in the face. The reality is none of these bands have very much pressure on them. Any one band is quite weak. You know, this is nothing. You know, this here is nothing. I can put a lot of distance, and there's no real pressure on any one band. But when you start to grab 3 bands, now I'm starting to get some good pressure. I could, you know, when I grab them all, I'm gonna have a way more pressure. Well, of course, same down here. I could grab one, hardly any pressure on this. Look at how far this thing goes. But I've got a lot of them down there. And I can create hammer pressure from all the different angles. And again, that angle will change as I move my body. That angle constantly changes differently than just having one band. Again, if I grab one band, all I can work out is this angle, you know, at one time. But if I grab 2 bands, I can work out more angles with these 2 bands than that one, you know. And it's not like I can work out 2 different angles. I can work out a lot of different ones. And then I decided, well, this is great for, you know, building the arm. You know, I used to just grab these and just pin it. And I realized it really wasn't attacking my hand and my wrist very much. And so I created this handle. You know, it's kind of like a thumb. And I grab it, you know, like I'll put it over here. You know, I grab it like I'm grabbing someone's hand, you know. And sure, you could make different size handles, I guess, but this is just the one that I had. This was my original one. It was just a flat piece of plywood that I cut. And then when Craig Tullier lived here, we wanted one that felt more like a hand, so he helped me make this one. And so the beauty of this is when I pull it from above, you can see it creates wrist curl out at the fingertips. And so now you're hitting your ability to wrist curl. And it's hitting it from above you, okay? And because it's out here, it magnifies the amount of pressure. And of course, I've got 3 of these bands. I could hook them all on there. And so this now creates wrist flexion, And then I've got this thumb with this hook. And so now I can create, looks like one of my bands was thinking about coming off. And so now you'll see if I relax, see what happens to the handle. So just to hold this handle in place, I have to use down pressure, pronation, and wrist flexion just to keep it in that spot. Otherwise, it's just going to hold me open like this. So it's now hitting a multitude of joints. I'm hitting my wrist, both from a wrist curl and a pronator, all at the same time, while using down pressure with your back and side pressure to hold it in the center of the table. Otherwise, it just, it wants to pull me this way. And so then, if you want some back pressure, let me just put a couple on here. So I've got a lot of different pressures going on. As you can see, if I just relax and let this go, it wants to pull this direction, and I need to use wrist, pronator, in order to maintain this spot. Now I could even, right now I got some back pressure here, and the wrist is just coming from above. But if I go like this now, I have to use wrist pressure from the bottom side of the wrist in order to pull it down. If I just relax that part, it pulls it right back up. So now I'm having to use the bottom part of my fingers, the bottom part of my wrist, all while maintaining pronation and back pressure, all at the same time, just as if you're arm wrestling. I mean, let's face it, you grab a guy's hand, he's pulling back, up, or he's trying to come in against your pronator, he's trying to supinate you. Whatever it is, it can be creative. Now, for me personally, when I'm using my handle, I typically just hold it and pulse front to back, maybe a little to the side, but I don't ever really pin it. I mean, you certainly can, but for whatever reason, I don't. I just work right here, and now again, this is hitting my wrist. It's hitting my pronator. Like it just wants to tear my pronator up, and but then I decided, sometimes I actually want to go sideways and pin this thing. So then I started to just grab a multitude of bands, and I'd hook them all around my wrist, or I'm sorry, around my thumb. And so now, because I got one coming from the bottom, I've got to use hammer curl just to maintain that position. Since they're only around my thumb, I've got to maintain side pressure with pronation. I mean, if I lose my pronation, the bands, they just come flying off, Set that down. And then it's time to pin it. Okay, the problem is, this is working pronation and side pressure and back pressure all at the same time. But when you got to finish someone, all of a sudden, the loser is here fighting upward. So you're trying to pull the guy down. So all of a sudden, you need to fight down pressure. Well, then I'll take these guys here. Okay. And I'm fighting up. And I will grant you that the second I grab this one is pulling me up. It's kind of helping me maintain my hammer curl. But since this one is primarily coming this way, I'm still having, this is not helping that angle that much. But now when I go to finish, as soon as I get to here, this one starts to take over. And then it's harder to pin. So, and you can have these bands coming from anywhere. I typically like to put the hooks at the height of my hand. Maybe just a hair, well, pretty much at the height of the hand. Some people want to go lower, some people want to go higher. I just like it at the height of my hand, but I can always add more. Then I got these ones down at the bottom. You know, I think I got 4 of them down at the bottom. And again, any one of these is not that hard. But man, you grab them all. And now I'm purely working on my arm. But if I want to switch to adding in some pronation, put a couple of them around your thumb, grab the others in your hand, and now you're working that hammer curl and pronation all at the same time. And so this to me is the greatest tool you could build, especially, and I preface this, if you don't really have training partners. Because I guarantee you, and I've had a lot of people in this corner, and as soon as I just say, here, hold this, and you know, I'll always start people off with just like one band like this, and I say, all right, just hold it, and they're like, all right, and then I will slowly add more and more bands, and the next thing you know, they're having to fight in all directions at the same time, both down pressure against your shoulder, your lat, and your back, hammer curl pressure against, you know, these and the back pressure, which is against your elbow joint. And then, of course, once you wrap it around your thumb or the top part of this handle and coming from above, you're working your wrist and your pronator all at the same time. And everyone is like, yep, nothing feels more like actual arm wrestling than this, other than actually arm wrestling. And hey, if you got 100 training partners, fantastic. But I like this, even like we have a lot of training partners here, and honestly, I still use this a lot because the strength of this never changes. It always applies the same strength. And so a workout for me is I'll work up to where I've got all the bands, and then I time it, and I'll hold all the bands for a set period of time. And then I try to increase that time. And if I increase that time, I know I'm getting stronger. Or if I reach where, you know, I can hold all the bands for 5 seconds, and all of a sudden I can hold all the bands for 30 seconds, well, one of two things happened. I either got stronger or these bands got weaker. Well, and it's true, sometimes these bands do get weaker over time, but I can always add more bands. The key is, again, don't have that much pressure on any one band. Otherwise, you will smack yourself in the face. So, anyway, I hope that clears things up as far as the different angles against the different joints. That's the key. You know, maintaining one strap here only hits your shoulder, you know, your chest, whatever it is to maintain this position, okay? But it's not hitting my wrist at all, or more my fingers. It's not hitting my pronator at all. Yet when you arm wrestle, you've got to maintain this position while holding all those other positions. And that's why I really love this thing. So anyway, I call this the Bob Corner 2.0. I'll probably add a whole bunch of more bands later, who knows, you know. And there you go. Have a great day.